So today we're going to be talking about virtual reality, and not just virtual reality, but specifically location-based virtual reality such as The Void out in California and Zero Latency in Las Vegas. Let's dive into the history a little bit of virtual reality. Virtual reality started with the Viewmaster in the late 30s, which, if you remember, was those little clicky things with the little discs that you put into them. And then NASA did some shit with them in the 80s, which isn't important, but they did it. In the 90s, we started seeing arcade games and little crappy headset games that weren't much more than 2D characters on a little screen that weren't even animated. They were just little light up things. Those don't really matter, but they happened. Then heading into the boom of the 2010s was Oculus, followed by a bunch of other ones like Google Cardboard and HTC Vive. These days, VR is used mostly for video games, from puzzle games to shooters and even shit like Beat Saber. And with the increasing popularity in VR games, there's been a need for companies to up the ante just to stick out. This is where location-based VR comes in. Companies are now starting to mix VR worlds with ours with things like The Void and Zero Latency. There's others, but those aren't as important because they basically all share the same technology. They've all got a VR headset of some kind, some sort of haptic feedback, backpack, chest plate thing that you wear, and motion tracking for not just the headsets, but hands and fingers. And what makes them location-based virtual reality is a physical space to interact with. And I'm probably underselling it because when you put it all together, it's really fucking cool. Sure, you got 30 pounds of equipment, but once you're fully immersed into what you're seeing, you just completely forget about that. When I did The Void in California over the summer, it felt a lot like laser tag. I got to run around in a physical space, shooting all these bad guys, and it felt real. I could feel the heat from the fire, the smell from the brimstone, but it reminded me of a project I had recently worked on, and knowing how I did that, I wondered how similar the inner workings of both those experiences could be. Unfortunately, these companies are pretty tight-lipped on the specifics other than their sponsors, but maybe I could shed some light onto just how much work has to be done for these VR games. This past spring, I made a small-scale version of a location-based VR game. I had the headset, which was an Oculus Rift. I made a demo game for it, which, for never having made a game before, turned out pretty sweet, and all that was made in Unity. I added real-time physical interactive elements of wind and heat and smells. I didn't have any hand tracking or finger tracking or anything like that, but we'll forget about that for the purpose of this video, which is to tell you how location-based VR works from the inside out. So it started with the level design. We needed a theme to be able to put different physical elements in, and we went with a desert. Knowing what elements we wanted in it, heat, wind, and smell, we bought the parts to make them. We settled on an industrial heat lamp, a box fan, and one of those automatic scent sprayers you can get for Walmart for like $5 and smells like ass. It smelled like ass. It smelled like Hawaiian ass. So we started with the scent sprayer, and after coating ourselves in 7 layers of shitty smelling juices, we emptied the canister out, filled it with our own pre-made desert smell, sealed it up, and repressurized it. We then needed a way to activate all these things with triggers based on the location in the VR world, so we made our own relay-controlled outlets to plug them into that had data being sent to them from an Arduino that told them when to turn on and off each component. From here, it was time to make the game, which took about 2 weeks of almost quite literally non-stop work for me. Most of everything was coded in C# for the VR, but assets and plugins made it relatively easier. After the world was created, we needed a way to tell where you were in the VR world to be able to turn the relay switches on and off, and this is where things got kind of difficult. So we needed a way of porting the real-time data from the game into Max MSP so the Arduino could read it. And after a bunch of research, I finally found that OSC was the way to go. This allowed the wireless transfer of the XYZ positional data to be sent into Max. Once in Max, it went through algorithms to get which region they were in and what needs to be triggered for each region of the level. From there, it got sent out to the Arduino and the things get triggered. So to recap, from Unity through OSC to Max MSP to the Arduino to trigger the relays to turn off or on our lights, fan, and smell. It was janky as hell and nowhere near as clean and refined as those professional studios are doing it, but it worked and gave insight into how complicated this new form of entertainment really is.